Good afternoon, and thank those of you who are here at the Press Club for coming, and for those of you who are streaming online, that's terrific as well. What I hope to do is to quell some of the views that urban school districts can't work, that they can't get better at what they do, they can't do what is necessary to give some of our most disadvantaged students in the society the opportunity to grow and succeed and to have better life opportunities. I'm going to frame my comments by talking about something that happened some 10 years ago that has had a dramatic influence on urban school districts. Eli Broad, who is a philanthropist from LA on the West Coast, put money up for a Broad Prize that annually would be awarded to an urban school district that had made the most improvement. He wanted to honor urban school districts that demonstrate the greatest overall performance and improvement in student achievement while reducing achievement gaps that are often too alive in urban school districts. And he had 4 goals. The first was to reward districts that improve achievement levels of disadvantaged students. Second, to restore the public's confidence in our nation's public schools by highlighting successful urban districts. Third, to create competition and provide incentives for districts to improve. And finally, to showcase the best practices of successful districts. The 100 largest school districts in America are the ones that are looked at annually, and up until this next round, there have been 5 finalists, and one of those finalists is chosen for the Broad Prize. Mr. Broad also provided dollars that went to the urban school districts that were finalists to provide college scholarships for urban school students in that district. So this all started in 2002, and Boston was a finalist the first 4 years, and I thought it was never going to happen, and bingo, in year 5, Boston finally won the Broad Prize, and it was my last year as superintendent there. But it was great to be one of 5 finalists for 5 years, and what I want to talk about today is what it takes to get change and improvement, and to think about sustainability and change as things move on in urban school districts, with the recognition that the quality of instruction in the classroom, and second only to that, the leadership in the schools, are the 2 most important variables that impact what happens to students and what kind of achievement results are provided for those students to move forward. Mike was kind enough to mention the book that I've just read, written, Urban School Leadership, which is about the work in Boston. And then there is another book that looks at 5 of the first 10 Broad Prize winning districts. And it's a range. I'm not trying to sell books, but different examples of what happened in school districts that were able to win the prize. So let me get started by setting the framework. Standards-based reform really began to get some traction in the late 80s and early 90s. And it was a radical idea because the expectation that came out of standards-based reform was that all students, not just some, were entitled to an education that would allow them to graduate from high school and to have opportunities based on the quality of what they had learned in their K through 12 education to move on to continuing education or a career. it was also a great change in the way we thought about what happened in school districts and schools. So the notion was to create clear standards of what students should know and be able to do, to make sure that all teachers and learners had access to a rigorous curriculum that was aligned with those standards, to provide support for teachers and school leaders to continually learn how to improve the quality of instruction in the classroom and leadership in the school districts and schools, and to offer transparent accountability systems that include, and this is important, particularly when we think about No Child Left Behind and what the focus was there, that include both qualitative indicators as well as quantitative indicators. You can't get good results, and in this talk about human capital, unless you build capacity in the people that enables them to work with students, have the kind of instruction that will yield the results that you're trying to get. So there's a reciprocity there between capacity building and holding people accountable for results. I want to give you some examples of a couple of frameworks that were important in the work that we did in Boston, and I wish I had been able to think through them and have them in San Diego and Oklahoma City in earlier superintendencies. But it was a school improvement plan that was based on 7 essentials, and the district plan was the umbrella for what happened in schools. And the core essential was effective instruction, not surprising. But the other 6 are not in hierarchical order, but come together and connect and support that quality of instruction. It's looking at student work and using data. A radical idea some 15 years ago, because there wasn't very much attention paid to data, and certainly not the kind of conversations we're having now about data and compensation, how teachers should be paid, and how you use it for intelligent decision making in terms of what's working and what's not. So the other 6 were student work and data was 1, building capacity in people, professional development, another, shared or distributive leadership with instructional leadership teams in every school in the district that were led by the principal and a half dozen, or depending on the size of the school, teachers from different grade levels and different subject areas that help design and develop the school improvement plan. Families and community, we often forget that, and people say, oh, that doesn't make a difference in urban school districts. It makes a huge difference in urban school districts, and the importance of an outreach strategy for families and communities. Operational excellence, and then resources. I can't tell you how many budgets I've seen over the years where you look at the strategic plan that a district has on the one hand and a budget plan on the other, and there's a disconnect. When the budget should be the plan for allocating resources that align with the strategic plan. And just while I have the strategic plan in my mind, I will tell you that my view is that 100-page strategic plans that are appearing in a lot of districts today are overwhelming for everybody, and that the best strategic plans that I see are often 10 to 15 pages long. And the evidence is pretty clear now that less can be more. If you focus and go deep in a few strategic areas to develop human capital and get improvement in student achievement, the likelihood is that the results will be much more significant and on the plus side than if you try to, which school boards often do, have to nod to special interests because everybody shows up at the board meeting and says, where's my favorite pet program in the budget? It's in the strategic plan. Why isn't it in the budget? But you can't do it all, and some things have to be more important than others. Also, it's important to think about a problem-solving approach. And one of the things that we worked with was one that said, you've got to identify the problem, you've got to analyze the problem and diagnose its causes, you've got to develop a theory of action. And so I don't sound too jargony. A theory of action is simply, if we do X, then we could expect to get results defined by Y. It's an if-then kind of way of thinking about strategy and execution. You have to plan for implementation or execution, and you have to assess progress, and then constantly be willing to adapt and modify based on what you're learning to get continuous improvement. So that was a second kind of framing of the work and how to go about thinking about it. Then the key elements for the design and implementation of systemic reform. And by systemic, I mean, how do you improve a whole system of schools rather than having just a few more good ones? A huge challenge, but the right challenge. Because if it really is a school system that's going to serve all children, you've got to think about it systemically in that way, or how you're going to reach that goal. And then, of course, there is the vision piece. The vision in Boston today and in most urban school districts would be more focused and challenging probably than the one that I had back 15 years ago when I started in more than that, 1995. So the vision today, and it's a controversial one, is every student in my school district should graduate from high school ready to. If we had time, I'd have you all complete that sentence and see if you came up with the same answer. But the answer typically is ready for some kind of continuing education, and ready without remediation, because too many kids that go on to community college have to take remedial courses before they can begin the community college course, and often that can lead to a 2-year degree, which will position graduates at that level to have opportunities in a lot of good-paying jobs. And in many other instances, it's going to require a 4-year college and university diploma, or even beyond that. So the other piece is, in all of this, this tension around fast, slow. Get results quickly, or if you want long-term impact of the results, you've got to go slower and go deeper, as I said earlier. So let me move to some examples of best practice and use them from different places. And I made the reference to these other school districts because we didn't all do this in the same way in the years past or going forward, but many of the same elements are there, and I want to get into the human capital part of the conversation. 80% of most urban school district budgets is for salary and benefits. It's for people. So human capital is a huge part of what you need in school districts and schools, and it has 4/5 of the budget. At the school level, it's even higher. It's 95, 96, 97% of the school level budget is for people. So one of the big changes that had to happen is where are we going to start? I'll give you my first example, which I still believe was the right place to start, but I would go about it differently. The literacy program was in a shambles in Boston when I arrived. The scores were not good at all, and I decided to go there. We didn't have enough money to do conversions in 125 schools all at once, so I had to figure out a strategy for how you divide it up and who goes first. And I thought my strategy was brilliant. It was brilliant for the reason that I did it is I wanted to see who the go-getter good principals were and who could write a 2-page proposal on why their school ought to be first on the list in terms of getting the additional resources for the new literacy program. Well, that worked really well. Of the 125 schools, I had 50 principals that applied, and I picked 35 schools for that first round. But guess what? The lowest performing schools with the poorest human capital and capacity waited me out until the end. which was 3 years later.